Great. Well, as we welcome everyone back for our final presentation, I thought I'd give you a little preview of what's to come as well. After this final presentation, our esteemed panel of judges is going to scurry off to our green room, which is going to become more like a Shark Tank or a judging cabal in the next few minutes, and they will make the final determination. While they're deciding, we invite you to enjoy some refreshments outside, stay around in this room, and then we look forward for as long as it takes, but we'll welcome all our judges back just after that for our giant check presentation, which is not to be missed. And with no further ado, we're on our final presentation. I'm very excited to introduce the University of Georgia. They're going to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started.
Hello, my name is Danielle Atkins. I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Public Administration and Policy, and I study health policy.
And my name is Justin Bullock. I'm also a PhD student at the University of Georgia in the Department of Public Administration and Policy Analysis, and I study public management.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having us here today. I'm pleased to be representing Team Patch at the National Fellows Public Policy Challenge. My name is Grace Bagwell. I'm also a PhD candidate in the Department of Public Administration and Policy at the University of Georgia, where I study social policy specifically related to low-income populations. Welcome to Athens, Georgia. Our community is home to a number of wonderful things, including the state flagship university, the University of Georgia, our SEC football team, the Georgia Bulldogs, go Dogs, and iconic rock and roll acts such as REM and the B-52s. While we're really proud of the things that make Athens a wonderful place to live, there's another side of Athens that's less well known. Based on 2010 census data for a county with over 100,000 residents, we have the highest poverty rate in the nation. This means that Athens-Clarke County has a poverty rate of 34.6%, higher even than that of Detroit. 1 in 3 individuals in our community struggles daily to meet basic needs for things such as food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. Although Athens has over 300 nonprofits dedicating to helping meet these needs, organizations are without a formal network for coordination. Also, there is currently no systematic mechanism linking donors and volunteers to organizations. This means that people may not get the help that they so desperately need. Now let me tell you a true story. I was volunteering one evening at the Athens area homeless shelter when a police officer knocked at the door. He was escorting a mom and 2 children who needed emergency housing for the evening. The night shift manager answered the door and asked the officer, "How can I help you?" The officer replied that he was there to find emergency housing for the family. Unfortunately, the shelter was at capacity, so the manager referred them to another shelter across town, unsure as to whether or not the shelter could host the family. The officer left with the family, and I never found out if they found a place to stay that night. The high level of poverty in our community and the disconnected nature of groups and individuals trying to address these issues motivated our team to find a solution. We knew from previous research and from our own community work that individuals in poverty often don't have just one need, but rather a cluster of needs that must be addressed. We wanted an idea that would both help our community and that would directly address the piecemeal approach to service delivery in Athens-Clarke County, thus enabling organizations to fill in gaps in service delivery. Patch was born. Patch stands for Piecing Assistance Together for Charitable Helpers. It is a communication network that matches area needs and challenges to people and solutions. We are offering a different kind of matchmaking service. Instead of creating love connections, we're connecting nonprofits, donors, and volunteers, all dedicated to working toward ending poverty in the Athens community. Best of all, our innovation is going to be free for all participants. In order to make Patch implementation a success, we have secured a partnership with a key nonprofit in the Athens community. This nonprofit is Community Connections of Northeast Georgia, which solely exists to build bridges between and among organizations, donors, and volunteers in our community. In order to make Patch a reality, we will use Community Connection as the access point to all their partner organizations, donors, and volunteers. To illustrate how this network will work and will address the disconnects in our community, let's go over an example. A family approaches a charitable organization in need of both emergency housing and medical care. The organization is able to fill the housing need, but not the medical care. So they push an alert out to the Patch Network. The Patch Network then posts the alert where all partner organizations can see it. A partner organization who provides medical care sees the alert and indicates that they can fill the need. A notification is then pushed back to the originating organization, the homeless shelter, who notifies the family that they have found them an organization that can provide them medical care. Thus, a family is served. Now that I've gone over an example of how it might work, let me take you on a tour of the Patch website. Welcome to our homepage. This is where organizations, donors, and volunteers patch into the network by signing up to create their own user profiles. Signing up is easy and will take less than 60 seconds. Here is an example of how volunteers will register. First, they enter their basic information. Second, they identify the types of organizations they want to serve, which will filter the types of requests they receive. Last, they indicate how they'd like to be communicated with, and their registration is complete. An important note is that this mechanism will work exactly the same for donors. Likewise, an organization that wants to partner goes to the home page and is directed to registration. They also enter their basic information, and then second, identify the kinds of services that they provide, which will filter the kinds of requests that they receive. Now they're all set to begin using Patch. A typical session for a nonprofit organization might go like this. The organization logs in and is immediately directed to their dashboard. Welcome to the Athens Area Homeless Shelter Patch dashboard. Let's go over a few of the features. At the top of the page, you'll notice several icons in blue. Most importantly, this is where organizations can request a service that is pushed out to the appropriate audience through the network for partnering organizations, volunteers, and donors. Now, please draw your attention to the numbers below the dashboard icons. These numbers represent a very important benefit of Patch. Patch will track the number of requests opened, pending, and fulfilled for each organization. This data collection mechanism will serve as a valuable tool for assessing Patch's effectiveness and for individual organizations to track their service delivery. Below, an organization can track the requests that they've posted and incoming requests. As an added bonus, Patch will also be available for organizations, donors, and volunteers as a mobile application to access on their smartphone or tablet. Now that your tour of the Patch Network is complete, I'd like to talk about feasibility, timeline, and potential impact in the Athens community. Patch's success really hinges upon community buy-in from nonprofit organizations and Athenians. Our solution will be successful because it is simple, user-friendly, and links organizations, donors, and volunteers in real time. Nonprofit organizations in Athens are under severe financial and human resource constraints. To address this challenge, we have designed Patch so that it is free for all participants. In addition, we will not compete for any local common resources in the Athens nonprofit community. Lastly, community buy-in will be ensured through our partnership that I've already mentioned with the nonprofit Community Connections of Northeast Georgia. This will ensure long-term sustainability and impact in the Athens community. In terms of the technology that we propose, we know from the success of social networking sites such as Facebook that people of all ages and demographics can and will use this kind of technology. Our project is also financially feasible. Our startup costs total $18,590. An important note is that we've already secured $8,000 of this in in-kind donations, which included professional website design and consultation and deliverables from a public relations specialist. Our projected yearly costs are approximately $10,000. This includes server hosting and maintenance, website updates, administrative costs, and promotional materials. In addition, there are a few great avenues for external funding for Patch, including the Ford Foundation and the Kellogg Foundation. The Ford Foundation funds projects focused specifically at poverty alleviation, while the Kellogg Foundation funds initiatives at promoting collaboration among nonprofit institutions. I'm sorry, Sarah, but we've got some technical difficulties. Okay. That's okay. I'm going to go ahead and finish the presentation without the PowerPoint. I think I can get the point across. Now that I've finished talking about financial feasibility, I'd like to move on to the timeline. Since this semester began, our team has been working very hard at the policy proposal that we're presenting today. Since January, we've conducted a focus group, site visits, and interviews with key nonprofit stakeholders. In addition, we've secured the partnership I've already mentioned with Community Connection of Northeast Georgia. Website design and public relations consulting was also completed. This summer, we plan to complete web programming, launch the website, and apply for external funding. Moving into the fall, we will conduct a critical 3 to 6 month pilot period with 12 community organizations recruited from Community Connection. This pilot period will be used to test the functionality of the website and to allow for any modification that needs to take place within the system. For 2014 and beyond, we'll shift toward community-wide implementation. One added benefit of the policy proposal that we are presenting today is that eventually we see this being generalizable in other communities. Last, and most importantly, I'd like to address impact. Patch is going to positively impact our community in the following ways. It creates a formal network for organizations, donors, and volunteers in real time. It links donors and volunteers to organizational needs, improves volunteer management, maximizes donations, and meets otherwise unmet needs. The bottom line here is that Patch is going to enable us to help more people in need in our community. Now that I've explained Patch, let's revisit the story I told you from earlier, although this time we don't have the video, and the story has a much better ending. The officer arrives at the shelter to ask for emergency housing. The manager tells him that they're at capacity, but that she can post an alert on the Patch network, which will then be sent out to partner organizations. Meanwhile, another shelter across town receives the alert. They can fill the request, so they respond through the Patch network on their smartphone, accepting the family for the night. When they accept the alert, a message is immediately sent back to the night shift manager at the homeless shelter. Back at the shelter, the manager receives the field request notification and tells the family that they'll be able to find shelter at Project Safe. A family that could have been without housing is served, and organizational resources are used more efficiently. This is the story we're going to be able to tell after Patch is implemented in Athens. Thank you so much for your time. We'll now move into question and answer, and thank you for your patience through the technical difficulties.
Let me, someone who saw the rest of your program with my friend Bill down here, I enjoyed the characters. For those of the judges that didn't get to see them yesterday, you missed a happy ending on the stick figures. Those of us on the judges panel that are over 40, which I think is probably everybody, has mentioned before the problems, everything, all these great ideas have focused on the use of technology. We're of the age we're a little more skeptical, as this kind of shows possibly why. But I love this idea. As I mentioned yesterday, I'm baffled that there's 300 organizations that are fighting poverty in Athens, and yet still 1 in 3 are dealing with this. My question is what I call a silo mentality. I, me, my, and mine, the worst words in the English language. Do you think you're going to get pushback, and how will you deal with pushback from some of these well-intended groups that don't want to share, they don't want to cooperate, they don't want to work, because even though they want to serve others, they may not be really willing to change much?
I think that's a fantastic question. It's certainly something our team has discussed. I'll start by saying that one way that we're going to overcome that is by using the Access Point Community Connection that we've already mentioned. They actually already have over 200 partner nonprofit organizations, and so those are the organizations that really like to play ball and want to communicate with each other and want to know what's going on in Athens. And so I think that's the first issue. The second way, I think, is just education, really, for the organizations about what's going on. Right now, Athens has no formal network whatsoever to notify other kinds of organizations the kinds of services that are being provided. I think that leads to an effect that I mentioned yesterday, and where people who are wanting to create a nonprofit organization directly addressing a need for a person in poverty often thinks that they have the idea first and will begin an organization without really even knowing about what else is going on in the Athens community. There's a lot of reinventing the wheel that's going on right now, and I think that this system will just in general provide a place for people to get information even about what's happening. That's the first step, is really education about what the other services are, who the other players are at the nonprofit table. And in addition, I think it really, I think that there's something to be said for the fact that Athens, while we have a lot of organizations, has traditionally supported nonprofit collaboration, and we've had a couple movements in the past 10 years that have really spoken to that. One called One Athens, which was directly a grassroots movement in Athens to directly address poverty alleviation, and basically everybody came to the table that wanted to play ball, and it was enough people to make some sustained change, such as creating a network for organizations that provide medical care for uninsured and underinsured individuals. And so I think that there are examples, countless examples like that, that nonprofits and Athenians want to work together towards this problem, but there just hasn't been a formal mechanism in place to make that happen or to allow that.
What does the organization look like going forward? It will be a nonprofit serving nonprofits, or is Community Connections going to pick it up? How do you see this sustaining beyond your tenure with getting this started?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the strengths of the Community Connection. They've already expressed interest there in housing us within them. So we haven't worked out specific details how that would work, but they have expressed interest in moving forward, housing us. We've also put in our budget, which we didn't quite get to, but an amount for personnel to the tune of about $8,000 a year. We thought one venue might be that. We have gotten strong support from the department also in terms of maybe having that person as a research assistant.
Yeah, I would just also say that our hope is, like I mentioned in the presentation, that eventually this is a solution that's generalizable. And so one way that we could make that happen is Community Connection is not specific to Athens, Georgia. There are actually many across the country. And a judge yesterday brought up a great point, and that was the point of partnering with United Way. So the point here is that there are nonprofit umbrella organizations that exist whose mission is exactly what we are trying to do, building bridges between organizations, donors, and volunteers. The problem is that there's not a simple, user-friendly way to do that. So I can see this happening and being housed in nonprofit organizations such as that as we move forward. But we're willing to, as a team, make sure that that happens.
So my question is there capability in your system to gather data to identify unmet needs or mismatches of resources and needs?
So I think the piece that we've talked about specifically that might address that is seeing which ones aren't fulfilled. So in the dashboard, we have one of the things we've talked about tracking, and that is not only the number of ones that are met, but the ones that aren't met. And so we think that might tap into what areas we're not being able to meet.
You've talked about having this web site use for inter-organizational communication and referrals, including the emergency referrals, as well as for volunteers to find out where they can volunteer, which is good because it can help address what the unmet need that is out there. But I'm wondering if you have considered that once you have this network of organizations organized on a website, the potential use by clients looking for services.
We have thought about that, and one of the benefits of the Patch Network, just by having these organizations sign up and create user profiles, it will be a repository for organizations in Athens. So there will be a directory, and it can be searched by type of service that you need. So anybody could go on to the Patch Network, go to the directory, and if they need housing or food assistance, for example, find the organizations in Athens that serve those needs.
That's great.
I like what I've heard. Sometimes a great idea is one that excites the community and adds value to a community, and those who present the idea, seize the idea, get it started, leave, get out of the way. So it's not, on this particular concept, I think it would be really cool if somehow it becomes like a forward response service in the community, in that sometimes before the oftentimes the first contact is with law enforcement, where someone, or a social services department, where someone needs to go to a shelter. And it would be really, as the system grows, if those individuals would be on the front end of the response, wherein they can access all of these service needs without having someone come to a particular shelter, and then the information is ferreted out to the broader community to see what those services can be provided, as the system matures, to look at it in the Fort response services context for the community. But I do think this is probably one of those services that can be best housed in the community organization that you've been partnering with, or the United Way, or in a larger consortium that addresses the needs of citizens in this particular area. And I do like the fact that you've taken away some of the competitive, adversarial things that can happen among social services organizations. A, it's free. B, it's non-competitive with what's out there. So it's kind of taken away some of the adversarial relationships or thoughts that can happen with community-based organizations. So I applaud you for your idea.
Thank you very much. I'd like to speak to both of those points, which were both very good. First, your point yesterday about it being something that was more of an emergency response is the first time that had been brought up, and I think it's a really great idea. However, we had, from a focus group that we conducted, had the idea of enveloping churches in the Athens community who also have the similar thing. They often have people come to them several times a week with multiple needs, and they simply don't know where to send them. And so enveloping anybody who's on the front line of service provision or who has direct contact with clients into the Patch Network is going to be critical for its success. And I think the second point about making sure that it's not competitive is something that we have been really intentional about. Part of that comes from my background working in public service at the University of Georgia, and a judge yesterday asked us about the town-gown relationship. And so we wanted to make sure, since we were, this is going to be a University of Georgia initiative, that we were very careful about delving into the nonprofit community and really talking to them about what they really needed, which is why we did a focus group with several of the key nonprofit stakeholders in our community, multiple interviews with people, and also site visits to make sure that this is the kind of solution that they need. And again it came up, don't make this where we have to compete with each other, because obviously that's going to kill the network in and of itself. So that's why we've designed it in the way that we have. Thank you for your points.
I said this to you yesterday, and let me just refine the point. This observation is true of each of the submissions in this competition, that they initially are conceived as technology-driven programs. The benefits of technology will essentially improve the delivery of service. But what each of you have done, and yours is a particular example, is that you've identified significant gaps in service delivery. It doesn't matter if a community has 300 agencies to serve needs if the intended beneficiaries don't know that they exist or can't access those services. So I think you, again, have undersold your real benefit here. And the United Way, for example, which probably funds a great many of these services, should really be your partner in this collaboration. They should, as I suggested to one of the others, they should be funding this because they should be concerned that the money that they're spending, the state of Georgia and municipalities and foundations are spending, is really getting to the point. And so I think you ought to really re-examine your approach and take this. I don't know the director of the United Way of Athens. I'd make the same offer to you if I made to the other people. But you really need to take this. I mean, I'm really serious about this. I think you got something tremendous, and its long-term potentials are really going to be significant in terms of not just saving money and accessing volunteers, but making certain that the people, that the money that's being allocated for these services is achieving its intended results. It's so good you don't need your 15 minutes.
Thank you very much for all of your comments. We really appreciate it.